Barbra Streisand and Yentl, a film she produced, she directed, she wrote it, and she stars in it, and it's turned out to be one of the big surprises of the holiday season. It's one of 4 new movies we'll be reviewing this week, and across the aisle from me is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
And across the aisle from me, Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, in addition to Yentl, we'll also be reviewing 2 other holiday films. Al Pacino as cocaine kingpin Tony Montana in the modern-day gangster film Scarface. Also, Mickey's Christmas Carol, the first new Mickey Mouse cartoon in 30 years. But now Roger stars with the last of so many 3D movies this year, Amityville 3D.
I hope it's the last 3D movie this year. I really do. You know those $5 special custom-made 3D glasses that I have?
Yes.
I hope I can put them away in my little drawer of cinematic memories and lock the drawer and throw away the key. The ads for this movie claim it is not a sequel to the other 2 Amityville movies, but gee, it takes place in the same house. It's in the same town, Amityville, New York. I mean, how many haunted houses can there be in Amityville? And one of the characters even talks about the previous murders and unspeakable events that have taken place in that house. He must have seen the other movies because he even knows the story of that old well down in the basement, the well that is said to reach down, 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 yes, indeed, to the very depths of hell itself.
Hold her, John. Don't let her get any closer.
Susan, let me go.
We gotta bring out the source. We gotta force it out. I've gotta confront it. Darling, you can't.
No, it's Susan.
Come out.
That is the worst-looking monster I've seen in at least 5 years. At least when it's in 3D, the image is so indistinct that you can hardly see how bad it is, but in 2D on this screen, it really looks crummy. And that's the spirit of Amityville 3D, all right. They talk a lot about confronting evil forces with deep psychic thoughts and trances and so forth. And then what they give you is a gruesome jumping jack with halitosis on his breath. This movie is a flop at the box office. It'll probably be the last Amityville movie, but gee, I'd sort of like to see at least one more Amityville movie, maybe Amityville 3D Part 4, a movie where they explain why anybody would move into a house that has a track record like this house.
Right.
Real estate mortgage rates have at least gotten a little lower now, you know. You don't have to take the first house that you look at just because the bank seems suspiciously eager to unload it at a real good price. And another question I have, at the end of all these movies, the house always blows up. I mean, why do they go to the expense of rebuilding it? Why don't they just put salt on the ground, make it into a national park or something?
It's an awful film. But you know what? I really think this sort of gives movies the bad name. Because you walk in, I walked in for every 3D movie this year, whether it was Space Hunter or Metal Storm or Jaws 3D. Everyone, when you put on those glasses, it really is an enchanting time. You're really looking forward to becoming a child again and all this. And then you get this sort of mean-spirited, with this one, this mean-spirited, ugly, knock them down, set up the pins of people, knock them down, and also terribly photographed. The 3D this year did nothing to add to the experience of enjoying these movies.
You're right.
All that you ended up with is eye strain and this little cardboard on your nose.
It's just a total exploitation mentality. Once we put it in 3D, that's all we have to do, because then everybody will come to see it in 3D.
The suckers.
And then we have enough gruesome stuff and a few things thrown at the camera. That'll take care of the audience.
Very mean-spirited
filmmaking.
Okay, coming up next at the movies, Barbra Streisand's first musical in 5 years.
I'm not sure I understand, but I like the way
Yentl is the name of Barbra Streisand's first musical in 5 years, her first since her remake of A Star is Born, and Yentl is an equally ambitious project telling the Isaac Bashevis Singer story of a young Jewish woman in Eastern Europe at the turn of the century who wants to study Jewish law and the Bible just like the young men her age. But that is not the custom of the day, and Yentl complains about it to her father.
You know something? Baked apple is good, little bird.
Sorry, Papa.
No, I mean it. I like it this way.
Really?
Oh, yeah. What, yum?
Papa?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it that every book I buy, every bookseller who comes, the same old argument?
You know why?
I envy them.
The booksellers.
No, not the booksellers, the students. Talking about life, the mysteries of the universe, and I'm learning how to tell a herring from a carp.
Yentl, for the 1000th time, men and women
Have different obligations, I know, but
And
Papa...
don't ask why. Go on, get the books. Get the books.
Thank you, Papa.
Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Papa. The shutters, darling.
Shutters. We don't have to hide my studying from God, then why from the neighbors?
Why? Because I trust God will understand. I'm not so sure about the neighbors.
Well, she figures out a way to get her way. Barbra Streisand's characters usually do that in her movies. She disguises herself as a boy, and she fools everyone. She begins studying with the boys, and she develops a secret crush on one of the boys she meets in class, and is thrown into a real identity crisis, though, when she's invited to that boy's girlfriend's house. The traditional role of women is what Yentl sees and sings about in this scene when she sees the girl her friend loves waiting daintily on them at their dinner table.
No wonder she's pretty. What else should she be? She hasn't to worry, and why should she worry? When she gets up, her biggest decision is figuring out what to wear. To pick a blouse, a skirt, and then there's the problem of what should she do with her hair. And later as she stands and studies the chicken, the question to roast or to not roast. Or better yet, maybe a pot roast. Tomatoes now.
Potatoes.
No wonder he likes it. It's perfect this way. Who wouldn't want someone who fusses and flatters? Who makes you feel that you're all that matters? Whose only aim in life is to serve you and make you think she doesn't deserve you. No wonder
Right.
he loves
It happens
what
all the time.
could he do? If I were a man, I would too.
That magnificent voice, and that was Amy Irving as the woman, young, beautiful woman they're serving. There is a lot of that interior singing to herself by Barbra Streisand in this movie, but Streisand also does break free when she is alone and lets her great booming voice sing out. Yentl was a surprisingly emotional experience for me on many levels. I think it works well as a story of female emancipation and a comment on the restrictions of traditional roles for women. And even better is the way that this film makes the point that the best way one can honor one's heritage, the best way Yentl in this film can honor her father and her father's memory, is by living up to her own potential. It is a sweet, sweet story that choked me up twice, actually, both times when Streisand was in song. This is a beautiful holiday movie.
It's a heartwarming movie. I enjoyed it, and I didn't expect to. I thought it was going to be a bunch of predictable cliches, and at the end, in the middle of the movie, when you have that three-way love affair,
Yes.
when each of the three people loves the other two people for absolutely honorable reasons, and yet there's this terrible misunderstanding because the girl doesn't know that Barbra Streisand is really a girl, I was sitting there thinking, not only isn't this predictable, I don't know how they're going to get out of it. What are they going to do? How are they going to resolve this? And at the end, the scene where she talks to her boyfriend is really a good scene, although I felt after that I did want a scene where she goes back and talks to Amy Irving, and I missed that scene in the movie, but still, it's a good film.
I'm also swept away by the voice. Just, you know, I think this was one way we learned that how movies work on us. And that beautiful voice, just singing there, even in that scene, and it's a common thought, you know, that every woman would like to have a wife, you know, that kind of thing. But sung so beautifully and so heartfelt, and when she sings at the end about her father, that's a really powerful experience, and I just love this movie for that reason.
You know, looking at this film, I was reminded that many times on this show, as we have reviewed Barbra Streisand pictures, I've said, and I think maybe you've agreed, it's too bad she doesn't get herself a really strong director.
Oh, yes,
you know, she tells these directors what to do and how to photograph her, and she needs somebody to really take charge and use that Streisand talent. And you know what? I think she found one.
Yeah, herself.
Right. Next of the movies, Al Pacino stars as a modern-day Scarface. Our next movie has a famous title. It's called Scarface, but only the title has any resemblance to the 1932 classic starring Paul Muni, the title and also the theme of self-destruction. This is a modern gangster movie about a tough young Cuban, a convict who's allowed by Castro to take one of those refugee boats to Florida, where in 1981 he begins to build a criminal drug empire by dealing in cocaine. The Cuban is played by Al Pacino. He muscles in on the established drug-dealing establishment, and in this scene he even proposes marriage to the girlfriend of one of South Florida's godfathers.
You like kids?
Kids?
Kids, you know, little kids.
Sure. Why not? As long as there's a nurse.
Good. Because I like kids. I like boys, girls. No matter to me.
Look, Frank's going to be back any minute.
Come on. Sit here. I want to talk to you. Come on, sit down. I'm not going to bite you. Okay, here's the story. I come from the gutter. I know that. I got no education. But that's okay. I know the street. And I'm making all the right connections. With the right woman, there's no stopping me. I could go right to the top.
At that moment, Pacino had it all together, but later on in the movie, totally wasted by drug abuse, he's a sitting duck in a mob-controlled nightclub. That's sort of in the great tradition of the Warner Brothers gangster movies of the 30s, and Al Pacino is very good in Scarface. This performance is a return to greatness for an actor who seemed to lose his way in recent years. After his great early performances in movies like The Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon, Pacino started turning up in easy money movies like Bobby Deerfield and Author. Terrible movies, but now here he is creating an unforgettable character, Tony Montana, a tough, cruel, hateful, ambitious criminal who thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't know when to stop. Scarface has been involved in a controversy over its R rating. The ratings board originally wanted to rate this movie X for the violence in it, but they lost on appeal, and it's rated R. It is a violent movie. It's very tough and rough and not appropriate for younger audiences, but it's also a very good movie, and the violence isn't for exploitation. It's an important part of the story, and it's a good movie, I think.
You know, it's funny, I didn't like the movie at all.
At all?
Except for one aspect, and it has to do with the violence. I think that some of the shootout sequences in this film are some of the most beautifully choreographed things, showing what happens in a violent situation, including the first shootout, which I guess really got hacked a little bit up by this rating because they took out some of the most gruesome scenes, and it's still pretty gruesome. But the rest of the movie, other than the violence, I found empty. I found, at one point, he marries that woman, and I can give that away. He marries that woman, and she calls him at the end a boring guy at the end of the picture, and I thought, yes, tremendously boring from the beginning of the movie. And I just want to compare this film to the Godfather.
No, wait a minute. Now, he's not boring at all.
Oh, yeah, fabulously boring.
He is fabulously boring. At the beginning, he's extremely interesting because he's this hustler who gets off the boat, and he's got to think faster and be tougher than anybody else to make his way in the drug trade.
Right.
By the end of the movie, he's boring for a very specific reason, which is he is totally spaced out on cocaine. He has made the key mistake of using his own stuff. Instead of dealing it, he uses it. Right. So he's boring for that reason.
No, I found him totally uninteresting. I want to compare it to an obvious comparison, The Godfather.
Sure.
In the beginning of The Godfather, when Al Pacino is in that uniform, and he says he's not part of the family, he's a different character, there's a fascinating dynamic there. And so what happens to Pacino's character in that movie, which is sort of ending up the same kind of way, that's a fall from, if not greatness, it's a fall from goodness, and it's interesting. Just let me finish. In this movie, we have a fall from louseness.
So what?
Well, it's just not interesting, Roger.
Do you think there's some rule that says the guy has to be good at the beginning so he can be bad at the end?
No, I say it's more interesting.
He's a criminal when he gets off the boat.
That's exactly right.
Then he has,
an uninteresting criminal.
He has a criminal's version of the American dream, which is get a lot of money, build a big house, and marry this blonde,
That's right?
And then, because of the drugs and because of his own fatal flaws, it all comes crashing down. So it's the story of a guy who's bad at the beginning, bad in the middle, and worse at the end. What's wrong with that?
Who cares? I didn't care about him in the slightest. His life meant nothing to me.
There are a lot of people like this guy, I think, and their lives mean a lot in this world. That's why all of
the famous gangster films are not about louses who got lousier. Some of them are about interesting characters who got lousier.
That's a historical footnote, but it's not a criticism of this film.
It's a criticism of this movie because it doesn't compare with its obvious comparison, The Godfather. Coming up next at the movies, the first new all-Mickey Mouse cartoon in 30 years. Our next film is only 25 minutes long, but it is a major event in the movie world because it is the first new Mickey Mouse cartoon created in 30 years. It's Mickey's Christmas Carol, an adaptation of the well-known Charles Dickens story with Mickey as the industrious and underpaid Bob Cratchit and rich old Scrooge McDuck as Bob Cratchit's boss, Scrooge. In this scene, Scrooge is taken by the ghost of Christmas Present to see how poor Bob Cratchit and his family are being forced to celebrate the holidays.
Why did you bring me to this old shack?
This is the home of your overworked, underpaid employee, Bob Cratchit.
What's she cooking, a canary? Surely they have more food than that. Look on the fire.
That's your laundry.
Not yet, children. We must wait for Tiny Tim.
Coming, Father. I'm coming. Oh, my. Look at all the wonderful things to eat. We must thank Mr. Scrooge.
Tell me, Spirit, what's wrong with that kind lad?
Much, I'm afraid. If these shadows remain unchanged, I see an empty chair where Tiny Tim once sat.
Now, I may be about to commit professional suicide because how can you knock a movie with a cute little mouse on a cute little crutch? But that's my feeling because that scene is deceptive. That is not what the whole movie is about. This movie has very few scenes with Mickey Mouse and his wonderful little family in it. This film does not rank with any of the classic Disney animated features. It's missing Mickey, frankly. He and his family are in far too few scenes. At its best, this is only a genial and slightly colorful little stocking stuffer for kids. And I'll be a Scrooge. I give it thumbs down. I was very disappointed.
I can't believe my ears.
Well,
you're going to vote against Mickey's Christmas Carol?
Yes.
With Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck? I am too.
Well, of course.
I am too. I was disappointed as well. I'll tell you two reasons that I thought. First of all, it's wall-to-wall with words. They talk for the whole 25 minutes. They don't use the magic of visual animation that Disney people are famous for. And secondly, they don't change the story. This is simply Dickens' Christmas Carol. Goes to Christmas past, present, and future, Bob Cratchit, and so forth. just like in the book. Usually, in the old days of the Disney studio, they would have put an ironic spin on it. There would have been something satirical. They would have had fun with it. It would have been Mickey's version of this story. But instead, it's absolutely a forced march through the same old story.
I would have rather have seen the re-release of two of the old, classic old Mickey Mouse. I'll stand two of those old cartoons up with this. It was, and you know, I went in there with a real good heart. I wanted to love this. I mean, I look forward to it. I wish Disney would make feature-length animated cartoons.
This is a real safe movie. They didn't have that extra little artistic push to make it into something a little bit more than exactly what you were expecting when you walked in through the door. Now let's take another look at the movies we had on this week's program. We both thumbs down on Amityville 3D, a new low in a series of movies that was already scraping the bottom. 2 thumbs up, though, for Barbra Streisand and Yentl, a surprisingly warm and affectionate movie. And a disagreement, though, on Brian De Palma's Scarface. I vote thumbs up for the movie's brilliant portrait of the gangster. Gene votes thumbs down because he thought it was boring and predictable. And finally, 2 thumbs down for Mickey's Christmas Carol, a flat, uninspired retelling of the story of Scrooge.
Well, you know, we like Mickey, but we wish there were more of him in this film. A big disappointment. Of all the holiday movies so far, first week, I guess I'd say Yentl is my favorite.
I like Yentl a whole lot. I also like Scarface a whole lot. No matter what you say, I know I'm right.
Well, that's why you're on the show, I guess. That's it for this week. Next time, we'll review more of the new holiday films, including Meryl Streep in Silkwood, the story of a young woman trying to blow the whistle on unsafe practices at her nuclear fuels plant. That's next time, and until then, we'll see you at the movies.